A hopeless romantic asked a beautiful young woman on a date twice, and he was rejected both of those times. Finally, on the third try, she said yes. The date went pretty well, and he turned that experience into one of the biggest one-hit wonders of the 1970s. Up next, this singer-songwriter tells us what happened after the first date and how he created a yacht rock classic, including an acoustic performance of the hit. It's all next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you used to tune into Saturday Night Live more for the musical guest than the comedy, you're going to dig this channel. Just subscribe below to get our features, stories of the songs straight from the legends. Our new merch is at professorofrock.com. That's what you see here. You can get 10% off of our Vintage Years collection if you just type in the word vintage. That's the coupon code. And check out our exclusive content at Patreon. Help us keep this channel alive. So it's time for another edition of our series, Bottled Lightning. This is where we celebrate a great one-hit wonder that captured our hearts and our ears for that matter. This one ruled the chart in 1976, and it's become a bona fide yacht rock smoothie. Moonlight Feels Right by Starbuck. Feels right. This hit included the greatest marimba solo in pop history. Up next, the Southern gentleman himself, Bruce Blackman, who wrote and sang this ditty, tells the story of a truly smooth 70s classic, including an acoustic performance. The story of what inspired this song is really amazing. It's really fun. As we go into this interview, I do want to recognize our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear. In my experience of wearing Zenni for over a year now, I can say that after 40 years of wearing glasses, they are the best frames on the market. They're very cost effective. They're lightweight, stylish. They're really the whole package. You can design your own at zenni.com. Do that today. Here's Bruce with the story. Well, let's talk about Moonlight Feels Right.
The wind blew some luck in my direction.
It was released in late 75, but hit in 76, number 3 on the Hot 100, number 2 on the AC charts, number 2 on the Cashbox charts.
Feels right.
All right, I was sitting, it was in 74, I was sitting on the floor of my house. I had my mini Moog. And a mini Moog is a monophonic, meaning you can only play one note at a time. I was just messing around with the dials. You know, a mini Moog is looks like the cockpit of a fighter jet. It's very complicated. And all it would do is play one note. It didn't play itself. Anything you play, you had to play it. And you had to be very precise, high finger lift to hit those notes. So one night I was just sitting there and I was working on the sound, and there was this sound I came up with. It was kind of like a bass, but maybe with a French horn stuck in it or something. I just thought it was a cool sound. So my left hand was going, just that, over and over. And this image came into my head about when I was in college. And I saw this woman on campus who was stunningly gorgeous. So after about 2 weeks, I got the stones to ask her out. She said no. A couple weeks later, I asked her out. She said no. One night, we're walking back from a pep rally at the stadium, and she was walking up in front of me, and the wind was blowing. And I walked up beside her, and I asked her out, and she said yes. So that image was in my head, and I'm going, so I go, the wind blew some luck in my direction. I caught it in my hands today.
Some luck in my direction. I caught it in my hands today.
And then I looked up at the TV and the sound was off. But I saw Gene Hackman, and it was the French Connection.
French Connection.
And just out of nowhere, I finally made a tricky French connection. You winked and gave me your okay.
I finally made a tricky French connection.
The rest of the song, what happened as we became an item after our first date. And on one of our dates, I took her out to a lake in Mississippi. I had this old ratted out MGB convertible. So we went out to the lake and dropped the top. but I couldn't say drop the top of the lake in Mississippi. So I said, take you on a trip beside the ocean and drop the top at Charleston Bay. That's what I originally said.
And drop the top of Chesapeake Bay. Ain't nothing like this.
The moon will send you on your way.
The moon will send you on your way.
And then I went, moonlight feels right. Moonlight
feels right.
So the rest of the song is nothing more than the images that just literally were a gift and floated out of the sky for me. I thought about just, asking her out and what happened and the dates we went on. And then the reference to Ole Miss, at the time she agreed to go out with me, she was dating a football player from Ole Miss.
You say you came to Baltimore from Ole Miss, a class of 7.
So that's where that was. Now, I didn't want to say, I couldn't say drop the top of the lake in Mississippi. Even I was saying Charleston Bay. And later on, I needed a bay on a big city. So that's where Chesapeake and Baltimore came from. So the rest of the song is just a fantasy literally about what didn't happen. Now, I've seen a lot of people putting on the internet about a sleazy old guy picking up a young woman. No, it was about a young guy asking a young girl out for a date. And I just put the scene in Baltimore. So that's all it was. And then I heard people saying, because of the laugh, when Moonlight Feels Right, I did that little laugh. Well, the reason that happened, when we recorded Moonlight, we had 3 hours, 9 to 12. Leonard Skinner was coming in the studio right after. As a matter of fact, Ronnie Van Zant was in the control room when I sang the melody. So we only had about 10 minutes left. And the engineer said, well, we can't do the vocals because the band's tearing down out there and we can't use the vocal booth. I said, can you plug me in straight to the board? And he said, well, yeah, nobody's ever done that before. I said, well, they have now. So we plugged straight into the board, put a Shure SM57 mic between my legs, hit play, and I started singing. I only had about 5 minutes because Leonard Skinner was, you had to get out of the studio for them. They were God. So I started singing it. Well, the right side of my headphones didn't work, and all I could hear was static in the left side. So I sang the first verse, and it sounded so bad to me, I laughed at myself at the end of the verse. When the record company heard it, they liked the laugh so much, and they made me go back in and dub in the laugh on the second and third verses.
I love that. That's great.
That's how it happened.
When my dad was telling me about the song, he said, yeah, listen to this little laugh. Isn't that funny? And then my kids asked me, Dad, why is he laughing? Now I can tell him.
But now the headphones were screwed up. When I did the song, when my hand finally healed a couple months later, I had a little old cheap $30 drum machine. It had 4 beats on it. It had a 4/4, which did not work, a 3/4, which is a waltz, that's no good, a march, no good, and a bossa nova. So I punched the bossa nova, and it was slow, about 104 beats per minute. The wind blew some luck in my direction. I caught it in my hands today. I finally made a tricky French connection. You winked and gave me your okay. I'll take you on a trip beside the ocean and drop the top at Chesapeake Bay. Ain't nothing like the sky to dose a potion. The moon will send you on your way. Moonlight feels right. Moonlight feels right. So that's the way I did the bossa nova version. That's the one I took to the publisher, and we got the deal to record. Now, when we got into the studio, and also when I'm playing like that, I had done a piano solo, like, and so on. Now, when we got in the studio, record, we changed it to a straight 4, and took it from 104 to 124 beats per minute. So when I was doing the chorus, Moonlight, 4, 2, 2, 3, feels right, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2. There was these long, awkward gaps in there. We needed something to fill it. We tried everything, cowbells. Well, I was messing with the piano, and I did, and every piano player that's ever taken a lesson knows this song. Which is For Elise. I was thinking, wait a minute. So what if I did that no, what if I did, it's 5 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So how about, so when we did the song, I used mini modes, and it became, did it like that.
Feels right.
And did that in 3-part harmony. And then when I did the solo, I did a piano solo, did not good. Clavinet, not good. And then Bo Wagner said the magic words.
Bo Wagner.
Hey, Bo.
He said, let me take a shot with it on my marimba. I said, okay.
Is that a marimba?
That's right.
And this is a,
Vibraphone.
what's the difference?
So Bo had a grand marimba, it's 8 octaves, and it's an acoustic instrument, it's not amplified. We put 2 mics on the bottom, 3 on the top. Hit play. Bo played that damn solo, note for note, improv, just like you heard it on the record. When he got through, it was as silent as a cemetery on Tuesday afternoon. It was just dead silent. And then Bo little squeaky voice goes, was that okay? I said, yeah, Bo, come on in. The record company hears it, and they wanted us to cut out the marimba solo. They said it was too long. It was 3:45 in an era of 3 minutes or under. So, and I don't know how I had the strength to say, but I said no, and we left it in. And of course, you know what happened. And by the way, Moonlight was released in September of '75, and it didn't hit until 8 or 9 months later, April of '76. We had completely forgotten about it, thought it was over. In fact, the publisher called me and said, Bruce, you got a hit. And I thought I had written a song for Tommy Rowe called Drop a Little Rock.
Drop a little rock in the water. Drop a little rock in the water.
And I thought that was what he was talking about. He said, no, it's Moonlight Feels Right. And I went, really?
Play the radio on Southern stations. The Southern music.
We were playing at a strip club in Buckhead, Atlanta for $51 a week each.
Well, for that solo on the marimba, how did you mic it? Do you remember?
Yeah, we put 2 mics on the bottom so we could get that, because those wooden bars on the bottom of that 8-octave thing were like 2 feet long and 3 inches thick. So we put that 2 mics on the bottom. We use Norman mics, and then we use 57s, 3 across the top, so we could get the full range and the resonance of the marimba.
Marimba, nobody had ever really done that. In fact, Casey Kasem said, this is the first rock song with a marimba solo, but Rolling Stones used it Under My Thumb.
Under my thumb.
Procol Harum used it on a few of their songs. It's big influence on a lot of bands that have come after. Vampire Weekend and the Horchata, they have a marimba in there. The White Stripes and Nurse. Finally made a tricky French Connection. You were talking about, you were watching the French Connection, or it was on in the TV in the background. I love that line. It's such a great line from a song.
To me, the French Connection, the meaning in my head, it was difficult getting a date with this girl, as the French Connection that Gene Hackman dealt with was difficult. in my mind, that was the connection there.
You got to tell me a little bit more about, I think it's an amazing story how you saw this picture of her.
So I went to Delta State to take world history. Well, I was in a poker game one night, and there was a photograph torn out of the newspaper of the women in a beauty contest. And this green-eyed, gorgeous woman on the left, I went, oh my God, who is that? And the guy said, that's Peggy Denman. She's dating a big-time football player from Ole Miss. And I said, where does she go to school? So I went over to Mississippi Delta Junior College. And I went there literally to meet her. It took a while, and it took the 3-strike rule to get her to go out with me. Now, we've been married 51 years.
So amazing. The other thing is that the eastern moon looks ready for a wet kiss to make the tide rise again.
Ready for a wet kiss to make the tide rise again.
You're writing this back on the 70s and didn't know that someday that yacht rock would be a thing. This song fits perfectly into yacht rock.
I had no clue. I got an email from a company in Taiwan, and they were doing this thing called the Extravagant Moonlight Feels Right boat ride to get on this boat. And they went out over the bay and were playing Moonlight Feels Right. I went, well, that's cool.
You winked and gave me your okay. I'll take it.
You winked and gave me your okay. I know when you're writing that, you were picturing you and Peggy on a date. The cinema of the mind, as I was reading in your book, just really took over. I love that.
Thank you. Thank you. Moonlight
Feels Right. Was that something that immediately came to you when you're figuring out the chorus, the word?
Floated right out of the sky when I went to those Moonlight Feels Right. Those two chords. I wasn't thinking. It was a gift.
I'll play the radio on Southern stations because Southern bells are hell at night. I always love that. I always love that line.
Southern stations, the Southern bells are hell at night.
Come on. See, Moonlight was turned down by every major label in America, and for two reasons, sometimes both. They say it's not Southern rock and it's not disco. Well, 2 years later, they're burning disco records. And so you didn't need to tell me it wasn't Southern rock. I didn't want to do Southern rock. There was already 50 bands doing it. And we played with most of them. We played with Marshall Tucker and a lot of bands. It wasn't really a good pairing, but
Peggy knew it was a hit when you.
She did. She did. I had the song for an entire year, and she said, "Bruce, you got to let somebody hear that song. It's the best song you've ever written." And I went, "Okay, but who is somebody?" So I found out about the Lowry Group in Atlanta, who had Joe South, the Games People played.
About you and me and the game people play now.
They had I Beg Your Pardon, I Never Promised You a Rose Garden.
I never promised you a rose garden.
They had I Knew You When.
Knew you when you were lonely.
Yeah, they had all that. It was big. I kept calling out there and nobody would call me back. So one afternoon I walked in, it was an old school building in Brookhaven outside of Atlanta. And I walked in the long hallway and there was a door open, but there was a divider. So you couldn't see into the door. So I walked in, went around the divider and walked right smack in the middle of a big meeting. There was 12 people in a circle and I was scared to death. So this woman looks up at me and she says, "Can I help you, son?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am, I'd like to see Mike Clark." I had heard that Mike Clark was a guy you had to see before you could get to Bill Lowry. So she turns to the guy sitting right beside her and says, "Mike, are you in?" And Mike says, "Yeah, what you got, a tape?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "All right, come on with me." So we went in there and he put on, the first song on there was a song I'd written called Rock and Roll Rocket, which was very unusual for the time.
Rock and roll, rocket.
And then Moonlight Feels Right.
I'll take you on a trip beside the ocean.
He listened to about half of Moonlight and he said, "Come with me." And we walked out of the room. The meeting had broken up. So now we go down into Bill Lowry's big office. Bill's standing there on the phone. He looks up at Mike and he says, "What?" Mike says, "I got something you need to hear." So Bill looks at me and says, "Can you leave it with me, son?" And I was so scared, I said no. Well, of course I could have left it with him, but I said no. And so He said, all right. He gets on the phone. He says, hey, I'll call you back. So he turns around. He plays about half of Moonlight. He turns back around. He says, is that you singing? I said, yes, sir. He said, is that you playing? I said, yes, sir. He said, do you have a band? Yes, sir. What's the name? Starbuck. He said, okay, what do you want, a record deal? I said, yes, sir. He said, okay. Mary. So the very woman who had said, Mike Clark, are you in? She walks across the room, lays a contract out, and Bill said, sign right there. I didn't even read it. I signed it. And then we went in the following Wednesday and did the recording session that I told you about. We were signed with Private Stock. Now, Private Stock was run by Larry Udall. But anyway, that was the only deal we had offered, so we took it. And so all they would do is just mail it out to the top 20 P1 stations in America and hope something happened. And every now and then something did. But absolutely nothing happened with Moonlight. So Bo and I came up with a scheme. So Bo went east and I went west. I did Alabama, Mississippi, and some of Louisiana, and Bo did South Carolina. And we would just we'd ride into a town, look for a tower. And when we saw a tower, we would look it up and see what their format was. And if it seemed to fit, we would go to the radio station. But I was coming back from Mobile, Alabama, but I hadn't been treated well there. I had one record left. There's a big station in Birmingham, Alabama. This is in AM days, of course. WERC in Birmingham. So I stopped at WERC and I met a guy named Mike St. John, who was the program director, and unbelievably, he was totally nice to me. He listened to the song. He said, man, this is a good record. He said, this is not a fall winter record. This is a spring record. He said, I'm going to put it on the air next spring. So I thought that was just a nice way to say no, but at least I appreciated that. So, 8-9 months go by, we completely forgot about it. And then they called. Mike St. John put it on the air and he called the record company. He said, my phones are exploding. Then what happened, it zoomed up the charts, but it bogged down in the 30s. And the big stations were saying, because we were using synthesizers, that the music was fake. But what they didn't know at that time is that synthesizers didn't play themselves at all. I mean, you played it, and a mini-mode was difficult. You had to be very precise playing those things. So we had decided to prove to them it wasn't fake. Bo Wagner put a pair of white gloves on, and we had a black light pin spot coming down on it. And he started the show with, he could play faster than you could hear. And then the lights come on and they could see that he was playing that, and then we went into the show and all hell broke loose. They loved it. Then the next week, whoop, 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 straight up the charts we went because the big stations started adding it because they knew that we actually played everything that they were hearing.
Well, do you remember the first time that you heard it on the radio?
I do. I was in Mississippi and I stopped, looked in my book, and I saw a station in Meridian, Mississippi. So I pulled in, I walked in, the guy was nice to me. He said, I tell you what, we're fixing to do the farm report. He said, so if you'll come in here and read the farm report, I'll listen to your record while you're reading it. I said, okay. So I go and I sit down and he goes over to a teletype and tears off this yellow sheet of paper and puts it out in front of him. He says, just start reading when that red light comes on. And I heard they just died laughing behind me. And I struggled through the rest of the report. So when I was leaving, I turned it on to that station and I heard the same guy. He said, hey, that funny guy that just read the farm report left us a song. Hey, we think it's pretty good. See what you think. So he played it. I heard it on the air. That was the first time. After he finished, he said, wow, y'all really like this. I'm going to play it again. And he played it twice. And that was the first time I heard it on the radio.
American Bandstand.
Lovely. Thank you, gentlemen. This is Bruce Blackman. Bruce.
And Midnight Special, you played both of those, which were huge. The signature white cap.
Complete accident. We were booked. We were going at Friday. We were flying to LA and we were going to be taping American Bandstand over the weekend. American Bandstand, some talk shows with Merv Griffin, Dinah Shore, several shows. And my manager said I didn't have enough hair to be the front man. So they sent me down to this guy in Buckhead, Atlanta, and they shaved off the front half of my head and sewed hair in it. Now, I mean, I had a Wolfman Jack Deluxe hairdo, you know. So the next morning, my head was all swollen up. It was red. It was infected. So my wife took scissors and cut all that hair out of it. What was left was my bare head, and it looked like a medical experiment. So then we had to fly to LA. Well, I had to cover up my head. So my wife went out on Sunset Strip and she bought a bunch of hats. Bandstand was the first show we taped, and right before going on, I had a yacht hat, a baseball hat. Peggy had found this English Kangol driving cap, which is the white hat I'm wearing right now, D1. And I put them all on, and they said, yeah, that white one, that's cool. So we taped all the TV shows, and I had to wear the white hat. So 2-3 months later, we're in Kansas City. I walk out on the stage without the white hat, and 10,000-15,000 people started stomping their feet going, white hat, white hat, white hat. And I went, wow. So my head roadie, Danny Williams, goes out to the bus, comes walking out on stage holding the white hat, and he gets a standing ovation for a white hat. And I went, okay. You mean it's that easy? White hat it is.
It's had such an impact so many years later. Read stories and interviews that you've done where people singing it in Home Depot when you're at Home Depot. And
I was in the dentist's office one time. Guy was drilling on my teeth, and then he'd stop for a minute, and Moonlight Feels Right comes on the system. And I said, that's me. And he went, yeah, right, buddy. You need some more gas? I said, yeah, put it on Jimi Hendrix.
What do you think about it over 40 years later? I mean, it's going to be 50 in no time.
Well, it completely blows me away. I see my streaming reports and stuff. We have like 1.2 million listeners on Spotify. And I mean, how is that possible? If I go back to my year I graduated high school, 64, and I go back 45 years, I'm listening to 1919 and Al Jolson singing through a megaphone.
Don't cry, Tootsie, don't cry. Kiss me, Tootsie, goodbye.
My generation, the first boomers we grew up where rock and roll started. And what's interesting now is the young ones coming back and discovering that music, because the music today, not wrong. I mean, people like Ariana Grande and Justin Bieber, I mean, they can actually sing. Justin Bieber is a good singer, but they like using that tuner. They do the tuner sound on it on purpose because that's part of today's sound. But, you know, I mean, every generation has their start. We had ours, you had yours. And what is the good old days of music? From junior high school to about halfway through college. That's it.
Feels right.
I love the story about your doctor.
Oh, Dr. Cotelli. Well, Peggy and I both went to the doctor. Peggy was in one room and I was in another. She saw Peggy first and she came in the door and she was crying. And I panicked. I thought she was about to tell me something horrible had happened to Peggy. And she started telling me about her sister had died just a few weeks earlier. And her favorite song was Moonlight Feels Right. And her sister died in her arms while they were singing Moonlight Feels Right together. And dude, I mean, I don't cry much, but man, that made me cry. That made me cry. That was something.
She had leukemia, right? And
yeah.
She, for comfort, I remember reading it. She said, "Will you sing Moonlight Feels Right with me?" And
yep, it was very moving, very moving.
Feels right.
Isn't he a cool guy? Leave us a comment about this 70s classic. What's your take on this song and on Yacht Rock? What memories do you think of when you hear this song? This is, I love this song. And what other one-hit wonders should we cover on here? Let us know in the comments below. If you like our content, we do invite you to be a full-time part of our channel. We'd love to have you. And do make sure to check us out on Patreon for even more content. And check out our Vintage Years collection. Thomas Estrada drew this. We came up with a concept together. It's really awesome. Help us keep the music alive. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth.